Hi, everybody, and welcome to this Dave's Digital Twin. This is going to be with a bit of a difference because this is actually going to be the Christmas edition of Dave's Digital Twin. And to be in true character for Dave's Digital Twin Christmas edition, well, the thing is, you do have to have then a Christmas jumper, which readily I've got under here. I suppose you do have to have a Christmas hat. I'll put that on, see if that works with the headphone. Probably not, but we'll give it a go anyway. So the Christmas hat. And of course, I can't go through this without having my trusty Santana guitar. So I'll have that going as well. And hopefully we'll get into the spirit of things with a bit of this. Whoa! Well, that is my Christmas welcome to you for this edition of Dave's Digital Twin. And I'm a bit surprised that I've taken this particular approach to doing it. But you know what? The thing is that this is the time that we rip up the rule book. The formal, boring, put you to sleep kind of presentation. This is not what this is about. This is about enjoying Christmas. I've got my wine here. I've got my guitar on. I've got my Christmas outfit on. So we're going to have a good time. But we're also going to talk about digital twins. As you mentioned, I'm thanking so many of you for your well wishes and encouragement as we started to post, I think it was yesterday actually, about the digital twin that I set up, and it's working. And in fact, I'm going to take you through the detail of that. So what I wanted to start by doing is to talking about this vision that I have for digital twins. And it's what's driven me over the past year to set up one of my own. So if you will, it's a home twin. And I suppose one of the aspects of that is this idea of sensor-driven mobile apps. Things like fire safety, matters to me. I've posted over and over again about it. Learning the lessons from Grenfell. What would have been the difference if there was an app that, for instance, detected when that fridge freezer fuse had blown and the fire that had just about started at that point? What difference would have made in terms of saving more of the 72 lives that were lost at that time? I think of it in terms of sustainability, and we're going to talk about that a bit later, and in terms of user experience. The other one that I'm really interested in is the idea of 3D indoor search. I suppose my experience of indoor search is finding the right room in a particularly large building that I work in, or it could be trying to find the aisle where the Brussels sprouts are. I know it's in the vegetable aisle, but honestly, I still have trouble trying to find that. So in 3D indoor search Wayfind, if there's an app that can do that, and there was some way in which sensors could point me to the right place, and that'd be fantastic. The other one that I think about is this idea of real-time data populating a portfolio analytics dashboard. A lot of the solutions out there are proprietary. So you're kind of locked into a particular platform technology. And the idea of having a platform that was free from those constraints around things like fire safety, sustainability, user experience, those types of things I think are really important. And then the idea of portfolio-wide alert system, whether that relates to fire, I could imagine housing associations and estate management teams with very large portfolios having an alert system, whether it relates to sustainability, to show that they are exceeding the predicted CO2 emissions. It could be to do with the building services and the fact that when the air handling unit starts to reach a certain level of vibration, it's showing that imminent failure is going to happen, and therefore this is a way of averting that across the entire portfolio. So those are some of the aspects of the vision that I have for a digital twin. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself. So I am the digital product manager for Restoration Renewal Delivery Authority. I work for Parliament. My background is in design technology and construction engineering, and I've got 3 decades of leadership experience in that. I've worked for top flight design practices like HOK and also for some of the largest top tier contractors. Also, some of the aspects of this that would be useful is probably to do with the fact that I'm a commissioned author for the BIM Management Handbook, advised Infrastructure and Projects Authority on digital construction, also Microsoft Power Apps developer. So I like the idea of low code. I just think it makes the technology accessible. I don't think that it's an issue that ordinary people, just like they have been able to create macros in Excel, are now able to develop full-blown applications with low code. I've commented on LinkedIn and digital construction publications on digital construction and digital asset management. So those are just some of the different areas. I don't want to go into too much detail there. Some of the projects I've worked on, International School of Kuala Lumpur, worked on that, gosh, that must have been about 7 years ago. And RIMED, which is the Biomedical Research Center, that was around the same time. Major science and technology facility, lots of multidisciplinary models involved there to deliver that project. Papworth Hospital was another one that I worked on, led the BIM team for that, and just one other, which is LG Science Park, 8.5 million square feet of R&D space developed to scheme design stage in 6 months. So some of the big wins in terms of design work that I've worked on. Some of them remember this, and that's where this guitar came from. So just as high point, everybody's got supposedly 15 minutes of fame. This was my 2 minutes of fame, but it was great fun there, and this is a great memento of that experience. So what's the agenda? Let's get down to business. Well, I'm going to talk about my unsustainable present. This is me being very honest about the fact that sustainability in terms of my domestic situation has just not been as much on my radar as it should be. And I want to change that. I want to do something about that. And then I'm going to introduce you to Azure Digital Twins. I need to make a views express statement. So there are 3 points I want to make here. The views expressed are mine own and not those of my employer. That's one. Number two, any mention of particular products or services are not intended to be an endorsement, a promotion, or an advertisement for those particular brands. They are simply mentioned for informational purposes. And the third point is that I am keen to ensure that this space remains an open space to be able to debate these issues and to have differences of opinion. If you differ from me, feel free to put something in the comments and say, look, I disagree with that. This is an open platform for you to be able to do that. Then I want to be able to model, and in fact, that's what I did. So I'm going to talk about how I've modeled the assets in my unsustainable present. I call it UP, unsustainable present. Also, what's the cost of analyzing data from my unsustainable present? Because the broader picture of this is that this has to pay for itself. And a lot of times we think about IoT data, analyzing this kind of data, and we're not aware of the costs that are incurred. And I think it's useful for us to look at that and then ask ourselves, well, what sort of value, what sort of return on that investment needs to happen for us to break even? I want to talk also about outcome engineering. I want to engineer my sustainable future, and very often the focus of that is in terms of outcomes. So we're going to go through that in a lot more detail. And then the next stage is to break even on my unsustainable future. So what's it going to take? What's going to be my goal over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, in order to break even on the investment that I've made in having a sustainable future, especially as it relates to my own home, okay? I want to talk also about 7 LinkedIn sessions, which I'm going to be running over the next first 7 months of January. So I want to be able to give you a bit of detail on what that's going to involve. And one of the key aspects of that is going to be that we're going to first talk about the LoRaWAN devices which I have used. Now, an example of a LoRaWAN device is this one here. So this happens to be a vibration sensor. You can imagine if you have a situation where on a site you've got lots of piling that's going on, causes vibration, and you want to detect whether that is going to cause significant damage to other parts of the estate. So that's an example of where you might use that type of sensor. We're going to talk about those. LoRaWAN essentially is an acronym, and it essentially means low range, wide area network. And it's a way of connecting battery operated devices like these are to the internet. And it normally goes, let me see if I can get this into the picture. So it normally goes via, get the wine out of the way. Be very careful about that. Don't want to have any spillages before Christmas of that. I don't know if I can get this device into the picture actually, but it's essentially the device that you see in the top right corner, which is a gateway. This is the aerial for that actually, so I'll just put it back. But it gives you some idea. That's the UG56 mile site, and there are other sensors that I've got around the house, but we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. But that's going to be the first session. The second session is going to be about the Azure IoT Hub. So the purpose of an IoT Hub is essentially to be a central message hub where all of the IoT data is converges and is being processed. That's the main point of having an IoT Hub, and this is the Azure IoT Hub. The next part of it we'll talk about is the event grid. So the event grid is this one here, and the event grid is a distribution center. It allows you to publish all of the events. I'm going to go in a bit more detail what event really is, but all of the events which are being sent through as data through the IoT Hub essentially are being segregated into channels. And those different channels allow you to focus on very specific sensor data. So that, for instance, in this case, I've got one sensor which is picking up things like the radiator temperature, and another one is picking up temperature and humidity in the room. Instead of confusing those two, they go into separate channels and they're processed differently. In order to process those, you have what's known as an event hub. So a function app. So the function app essentially captures and processes the data in readiness for a digital twin. So the fifth of these sessions is going to be about the Azure digital twin, the setup of the twin graph, which essentially is the way that we set up what's known as the ontology. Ontology is a big term which essentially is a way of defining the essential properties of different components that comprise an overall system. Okay, whether that happens to be different components of a manufacturing production line or the different components that comprise this hope, I can set up that through a twin graph, and we'll talk about that. I'm also going to talk about the 3D Scene Studio. So this is how we visualize the data in a 3D spatial context. Okay, so we'll talk about that, how that gets done. Also, this is where you can color code your model in order to alert to, for instance, sensor values the values of the sensor data, which are significantly out of bounds. The next one we're going to talk about is, and this is the final session, is going to be about the event hub. So this is going to explain how all that information is brought together for analysis purposes. We're going to be exploring things like MS Fabric, the Data Explorer, and Power BI. So please watch out for those 24/5 sessions. I am going to be looking for people to join me on those sessions because I think it's really important that we have a big conversation about this. There are movers and shakers who are in this industry that I'd like to give the chance to put across their view and to share their opinions. So I'm going to be looking forward to being joined by guests on this Home Twin 2025 event.